The silent radio of Clover Hill. The voice beneath the static. You ever drive through one of those towns that feels like time gave up on it? Like the roads remember who used to walk them, but the people don't anymore? That's Clover Hill, Tennessee. No one talks about it these days, but somewhere out there, off Route 7 where the fog gets thick around midnight, sits a radio tower that still hums, broadcasting voices that shouldn't be speaking anymore. This story isn't one you'll find in your average history book. It's hidden in the late-night message boards, half-deleted blog posts, and whispered rumors at Tennessee truck stops. But what happened to Matt Kessler, that's real. I found his journal. I found the tapes. And once you hear this, you'll wonder what parts of your own life might be floating on some lost frequency, waiting for someone to tune in. Matt Kessler wasn't anybody special. He was a 26-year-old radio technician, freshly laid off from a Nashville tech company that didn't survive the market crash. Like a lot of guys his age, Matt had a dream once. He wanted to create the kind of music that makes your chest ache. But life had other plans, bills piled up, his girlfriend left for Chicago, and what he had left was an old Ford Ranger, a box of radio equipment, and a heart stuck somewhere between regret and hope. One night in October, classic, cold, and overcast, Matt got a call from an old college friend, Jeremy, now a freelance sound engineer. Jeremy mentioned something strange. An old FM radio station, Wees 103.6, was still broadcasting late at night near Clover Hill. Except, according to every record, Wees shut down in 1984 after a fire killed 3 people inside. No one had worked the tower since. But the strangest part? Jeremy heard something on the broadcast. Not static. Not old music. But voices. Calling out names. Names of people who'd gone missing in the last 50 years. And one of those names was Matt Kessler. That night, something inside Matt cracked. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the idea that somewhere out there, the universe still remembered him. So he packed his gear and drove toward Clover Hill. The town was exactly what you'd imagine, abandoned gas stations, peeling billboards, and trees that stretched over the road like they were trying to hide what was left behind. Fog rolled in thick as soup, swallowing the headlights until the world felt like it ended 6 feet from his front bumper. By midnight, Matt found the tower. It stood alone in a clearing, rusted and creaking in the wind, its blinking red light barely cutting through the fog. Below it was a concrete bunker, its metal door covered in rust and vines. The lock was broken, like someone, or something, wanted people to come inside. The air inside the bunker was cold. Colder than it should have been. Dust hung in the flashlight beam like frozen snow. Matt followed a narrow staircase down into the guts of the station, where the old broadcast room sat untouched. Cracked glass windows. Water-stained soundproofing. Vintage reels of tape scattered across the floor. And in the center of it all, a radio console. Still on. Still broadcasting. A low hum filled the room, like a sleeping beast breathing slow and steady. He adjusted the frequency dial, 103.6. The hum faded. And then a voice, soft as a whisper but clear as day, filled the room. Matthew. Matthew Kessler. I've missed you. Matt froze. His flashlight flickered. He hadn't told anyone he was coming here. He leaned closer, sweat cold against his back. Who? Who is this? The voice responded, almost tender, almost sad. Remember the attic? The blue bicycle? The time you fell and cried under the elm tree? Matt's breath hitched. Those were childhood memories. Private ones. Things only his mother knew. Things no one else could have said. Except his mother died 5 years ago. And then the voice said something that turned his blood to ice. Matthew, it's almost midnight. Don't leave yet. There's something you need to hear. The room darkened. The lights on the console flickered like dying stars. And then, faint beneath the static, came other voices. A dozen. Maybe 100. Whispering names. Dates. Fragments of memories. 1998. Emily Carson. Lost on the Ridge. 1957. Walter Poe. Never found in the mines. 2010. Jennifer Kessler. Drowned beneath the mill. Jennifer Kessler. Matt's sister. She vanished when they were kids. Everyone said she ran away. But they never found her body. And now, here was her name, dangled in the static like a ghost waiting for him to listen. Matt stumbled back, his mind racing between disbelief and terror. He thought maybe this was a prank. Maybe the town kids rigged the radio. Maybe Jeremy was messing with him. But when he tried to call Jeremy, there was no signal. When he tried to leave the bunker, The door slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the walls. And somewhere deeper in the station, beyond a second locked door, he heard it. A girl's laugh. Soft. Familiar. And very, very real. That's where part 1 ends. Matt Kessler came looking for ghosts on a dead radio signal. But what he found was something far worse, something that knew his name, his past, and his deepest regrets. And it wasn't done with him yet. Where the frequencies fall silent. The laugh faded into the darkness, leaving only the steady hum of the radio console. Matt's heart pounded like a bass drum in his chest. His hands trembled as he swept his flashlight over the peeling walls, looking for another door, another way out. But in that suffocating quiet, something else crept in. Something colder than the room itself. A memory. Of Sunday afternoons with his sister Jennifer, biking through Clover Hill before the mill closed down. She used to race him across the bridge, her laughter carrying in the wind like music. But then, she was gone. Disappeared without a trace. Matt was only 12. And no one ever gave him answers. Until now. The radio crackled again. "She's waiting, Matthew." The voice had changed, warmer now, almost comforting. Like a mother calling a child home. "Don't be afraid. You belong here." Matt swallowed hard and pushed deeper into the bunker, his flashlight sweeping over cracked linoleum floors and moldy filing cabinets. He found a second hallway, narrower than the first, lined with faded photographs. Snapshots of people smiling awkwardly at town fairs, fishing at the river, dancing at the Clover Hill Harvest Festival. Every photo had a name written in faded ink. And every one of those names. He'd heard them on the radio. Lost people. Forgotten people. People the world had moved on without. And then he saw it. A photograph of himself, no older than 6. Standing next to Jennifer. Both smiling beneath the elm tree outside their childhood home. Except in this photo, someone else stood behind them. A tall shadow. Faceless, but watching. Matt never remembered anyone being there. But somehow, the camera had seen it. Further down the hall, he found the door. Heavy, iron, and chained shut. But from the other side came soft music. A melody faintly familiar, like an old lullaby their mother used to hum on stormy nights. And over the music, Jennifer's voice. "Matt. Come play with me. It's safe in here. It's always been safe in here." His breath caught. It sounded like her. Sweet, gentle, just like he remembered. But somewhere deep inside, a chill crawled down his spine. Why would her voice still sound like a little girl's after all these years? He tried the handle. Locked. But as his fingers brushed the cold metal, the chains loosened on their own. Falling away with a clatter that echoed through the station. The door creaked open, revealing a room washed in blue light. And there she was. Jennifer. Frozen in time, exactly as she looked the day she vanished. Braided hair. Blue bicycle helmet in her hands. A white dress with grass stains on the knees. She smiled at him, eyes bright but distant, like a reflection in water. "You found me," she whispered. Matt stepped forward, tears burning his eyes. He wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. "Where have you been?" he choked. "We looked everywhere for you. We thought you were dead." Jennifer tilted her head, still smiling. "I've been right here, Matt. In the static. In the quiet places. Waiting for you to listen." The blue light flickered. For a split second, her smile twisted into something colder. Wider. Hungrier. Then it softened again. "Stay with me. Just like before. We can ride bikes again. Play under the elm tree. It'll be like you never left." For a moment, Matt almost said yes. The bunker, the loneliness, the crushing weight of the outside world. None of that mattered here. But something deep in his gut screamed. He remembered why they left Clover Hill. The town died for a reason. And then he noticed the walls. Behind Jennifer, hundreds, no, thousands, of old radios lined the room. All of them playing different voices. Crying. Laughing. Begging. Screaming. It wasn't just Jennifer in the static. They were all trapped here. Jennifer's voice softened, but her eyes grew cold. "If you leave, you'll forget me. Everyone does. And then you'll be alone again, Matthew. Just like always." The guilt wrapped around his throat like a noose. How many nights had he spent blaming himself for her disappearance? How many relationships had fallen apart because he couldn't let go of the past? Maybe this was where he was meant to be. But then, over the hum of the radios, another voice cut through. Low, steady, and real. "Matt. You have to wake up." It was Jeremy. Faint, but clear. Get out of there. That's not your sister. That's something else. Jennifer's smile broke. Her eyes burned cold and sharp as ice. He's lying, Matt. Don't listen to him. The walls began to shake. The radios crackled and hissed, voices turning into harsh static like a million bees buzzing in his skull. The blue light flickered, fading into deep crimson. Jennifer stepped forward, her form blurring at the edges. Stay. 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 Matt grabbed his radio transmitter, fingers trembling, and tuned it to 103.6. Static. Then Jeremy's voice again. You can still get out. Tune the signal back to 0. 0 is safe. 0 cuts the frequency. Jennifer lunged toward him, hands like claws, her voice breaking into static screams. Don't leave me. Matt spun the dial toward 0. The room exploded in white light. And then... silence. When Matt opened his eyes, the bunker was dark. The radios were gone. The blue light vanished. The door behind him stood wide open, letting in the cold midnight air. He was alone. Or so he thought. Until he turned around and saw it. On the radio console, freshly scribbled in red marker. This isn't over, Matthew. The last broadcast. The next morning broke gray and cold. Matt stood outside the bunker, the red blinking light on the tower fading with the daylight. Everything looked normal again. The fog was gone. The air smelled like wet earth and old pine. But nothing felt right. He thought about driving away. Leaving Clover Hill behind forever. But when he reached for his truck keys, his hand froze. Because the static wasn't gone. It was inside him now. A low hum, vibrating somewhere deep in his skull, like a distant radio that refused to be switched off. Matt didn't drive away that morning. Instead, he returned to the console. The room was quiet, dust motes drifting through the sunlight leaking in from the stairwell. But the radio was gone. The wires were torn out, the speakers smashed. Only the red marker message remained. This isn't over, Matthew. He sat down at the cracked desk, hands shaking. He thought about Jennifer. Her laugh under the elm tree. The guilt that ate him alive for years. But what if? What if she never left Clover Hill? What if she was pulled into something far bigger? A signal. A frequency. Something ancient and alive, feeding on grief, on loneliness, on the voices we leave behind. As the hours passed, Matt drifted between exhaustion and hallucination. He saw his mother's face in the cracked glass. He heard Jeremy calling from somewhere far away. He even imagined himself still back in Nashville, spinning records at some dimly lit bar, pretending this town never existed. But reality was colder. And when night fell again, the tower hummed back to life. He tuned his handheld receiver, just to check. 103.6 crackled to life. And there she was. Jennifer's voice, softer now. Almost human. You left me once. Don't leave me again. Matt swallowed hard. He realized something then, something terrifying. This wasn't just Jennifer. This station had been here long before either of them were born. Every missing person, every lonely soul who wandered too far into the night. The tower caught them. Held them in the static, looping their voices forever. Jennifer had just been the first voice Matt could recognize. But there were hundreds. Thousands. And now the tower wanted him too. The console sparked to life without warning. Lights flashed. Dials spun. And the same voice whispered in his ear, closer than ever before. Broadcast, Matthew. Tell your story. Let them hear you. He looked at the mic. If he spoke into it, maybe he could warn others. But deep down, he knew the truth. Once you spoke into the signal, you became part of it. That's why the voices never aged. That's why Jennifer was still a child. Time didn't move inside the frequency. It just played on repeat. Matt's hand hovered over the mic. And then, his phone buzzed. Somehow, by some miracle, Jeremy had gotten through. A single text message. Break the tower. Smash the base. Kill the source. Matt didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rusty fire axe from the corner of the room and ran outside, his breath sharp in the freezing night air. The tower loomed above him, pulsing like a living heart. He swung the axe into the support cables. Again. And again. The wind howled. The static screamed in his ears, a million voices crying out in anger. And then, with one final blow, the tower cracked. It leaned. It fell. And with a thunderous crash, the signal went silent. For the first time in what felt like forever, the night was quiet. Truly quiet. Matt collapsed to his knees, breathing hard, tears streaming down his face. But even in the silence, something lingered. A faint whisper. "Thank you, Matthew." "Jennifer." But this time, her voice wasn't trapped. It was free. Weeks later, Matt returned to Nashville. He tried to rebuild his life. He took a job fixing audio gear at a local college. He reconnected with Jeremy. He even started playing guitar again, writing songs about places no one remembered. But some nights, when the wind blows just right, if you tune your radio to 103.6, you'll still hear the static. And sometimes, beneath it, a voice will whisper your name, asking if you remember. Because Clover Hill never really disappears. It waits. For the lonely. For the lost. For anyone who listens too long to the silence between stations. The silent radio of Clover Hill still hums somewhere out there. The question is, will you listen? The forgotten camp at Dead Man's Lake. The campfire never burned out. There's something about returning to a place from your childhood that feels both comforting and cruel. Like the trees remember who you used to be. But they've been watching you change, and they're not happy about it. Dead Man's Lake was that kind of place. Out past the worn-out towns of upstate New York, past the cornfields and forgotten gas stations, down a cracked dirt road where the GPS gives up and the radio turns to static. That's where you'll find it. Camp Hollow Pines. Abandoned since 1999. But if you ask the right people in the diner down in Middletown, they'll tell you the fires still burn at night. And sometimes, if the wind dies down, you'll hear kids laughing by the water. Problem is, the camp's been empty for over 20 years. This story's about 5 friends who thought it'd be a good idea to go back. Not teenagers. Not horror movie dumb. Adults. Late 20s. They knew better. But some memories are like fishing hooks in your brain. You can try to pull them out, but the scar stays. It all started with Luke. Luke was the quiet one growing up. He had the kind of mind that kept score of everything, who won at Capture the Flag, who stole his flashlight, who cried the night the counselors vanished. And yeah, I said vanished. Summer of '99. 2 counselors disappeared from Camp Hollow Pines without a trace. Search parties combed the woods. Police dragged Dead Man's Lake. No bodies, no clues. And the next summer, the camp shut down. Luke and his friends, Emily, Chris, Sarah, and Ben, never talked about it again. Until Luke found something. A photo. Faded and cracked. 5 kids standing on the old dock at Dead Man's Lake. But there was a 6th shadow standing behind them. Tall. Thin. No face. And none of them remembered anyone else being there. Luke called them all on a rainy Thursday night. Told them they needed to go back. Closure, he said. Face our fears. Chris laughed it off, but showed up anyway. Emily, now a nurse in Albany, was hesitant but curious. Ben was going through a divorce and needed an escape. And Sarah? Well, Sarah had her own reasons. Some places you go to find answers. Others you go because something's calling you back. They met at the edge of the old camp road on a Friday night. The wind smelled like pine needles and rain. Luke had a printed map, a couple of flashlights, and enough beer to pretend they weren't all terrified. The gates to Hollow Pines creaked open like an exhale. And beyond them, the world changed. The cabins were still there, rotting and cracked but standing tall like skeletons of a forgotten summer. The mess hall windows were broken, but inside the long tables sat exactly as they'd left them. Even the archery range had arrows stuck in the hay bales, waiting for kids who never came back. But it was the dock that pulled them in first. Dead Man's Lake stretched out before them like a black mirror, still and silent under the moon. And there, tied to the dock, was a canoe. Oh, old, weather-beaten. And wet. Like someone had just used it. They made camp near the fire pit. At first, it felt almost normal. Laughing about stupid camp crushes, telling stories about sneaking into the kitchen for marshmallows, teasing Ben for still being afraid of spiders. But the air got colder fast. And when the wind blew across the lake, it carried something with it. Whispers. Too soft to make out. But there. Just beyond hearing. Sarah was the first to notice the footprints. Small, barefoot, and fresh in the dirt. That night, they lit a fire. And the woods felt closer. The moon disappeared behind clouds, and the shadows stretched long and thin between the trees. Luke pulled out the photo again. Look at this, he said, holding it toward the firelight. But the photo had changed. The kids were gone. Now it showed the dock. Empty. Except for the tall figure, standing alone at the water's edge. And behind it, in the reflection of the lake. 5 shadows. Exactly like them. That's when the laughter started. High-pitched. Distant. Children. Coming from the woods, circling the camp like coyotes. Ben stood up, shining his flashlight toward the trees. Nothing. But when he turned back, his seat by the fire was wet. Like someone had been sitting there in the rain. Around midnight, the fog rolled in. Thick, white, and heavy, swallowing the woods and muffling the world. And through the fog, on the far side of the lake, a lantern light flickered. Moving slowly along the shore. The others froze, but Luke whispered, "That's the counselor's light. The one they used when we were kids." Sarah's voice cracked. "But the counselors disappeared. Remember?" Luke didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the flashlight, grabbed the canoe rope, and said, "I have to know." Against their better judgment, they followed him. The canoe slid out across Dead Man's Lake, the water silent beneath them. Fog wrapped around their shoulders like cold fingers. The lantern bobbed ahead, always just out of reach. And then, halfway across the lake, their flashlights cut out. All of them. Dead batteries. And in the dark, from somewhere below the water, a hand reached up. Pale. Thin. Child-sized. And grabbed the side of the canoe. That's where part 1 ends. The lake is deep. The memories are darker. And Dead Man's Lake never lets go of what it takes. The drowned and the damned. The canoe rocked violently. Ben nearly fell overboard as the pale hand clung to the boat's edge, its fingernails cracked and splintered like driftwood. Chris swung his flashlight at it instinctively. Nothing. The light flickered, died, then came back on. The hand was gone. But ripples circled the canoe like something large had just slipped beneath the surface. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Every single one of them knew. Something was awake in Dead Man's Lake. They paddled faster, the fog swallowing their breaths, the cold sinking into their bones. The lantern on the opposite shore flickered out. And for a moment, they were alone. Suspended between the black water below and the empty sky above. Until the voices started. Whispers. Murmurs. Echoes of their own conversations from years ago. "Last one to the dock's a rotten egg. Bet you won't jump in after dark. What was that noise in the woods?" Luke froze mid-stroke. "Those are our voices. From back then." Emily's voice broke in a whisper. "How is this happening?" When they finally reached the far shore, the fog parted like a curtain. There it stood. Cabin 12. The counselor's quarters. Boarded up, windows shattered, roof half collapsed. But the porch light. It was on. Buzzing faintly in the mist. Luke led them up the worn steps, the floor creaking beneath their weight. Inside, dust coated the old bunk beds and shelves. But on the desk sat a fresh journal. The first page read, "July 1999, Day 3, I saw them again tonight. The children from the lake. Smiling, even though their faces were wrong." Sarah flipped through the pages, each one filled with panicked handwriting. Mentions of voices outside the cabin, faces at the windows, and something tall watching from the tree line. And then, a final entry. "If you're reading this, it's too late. The lake keeps what it loves. And it loves the lost." The room went cold. A shadow moved past the broken window. And then another. Small figures. Children. Pale, soaking wet, their faces blurred like water-damaged photos. They circled the cabin slowly, their footsteps silent against the leaves. Emily backed toward the door. "We need to leave. Now." But when she opened it, there they were. 10. No, maybe 20 drowned children. Smiling. Watching. Waiting. The group barricaded the door, hearts racing, breaths sharp. Chris checked his phone. No signal. Ben sat down, head in his hands. "This is our fault," he whispered. "We left them here." Everyone looked at him. "What are you talking about?" Luke asked. Ben's voice cracked. "The counselors didn't disappear. We did." The truth spilled out like a confession too long buried. Back in '99, on the night the counselors vanished, the 5 of them snuck out after curfew. They went swimming in Dead Man's Lake. Luke dared Ben to swim out to the old rope swing. But Ben slipped beneath the water. And when he resurfaced, he wasn't alone. He spoke of a figure in the water, tall and thin, watching from beneath the dock. They panicked. Ran. Lied. Told the camp staff they found the counselor's cabin empty. They never told anyone about the figure. Or the voice that whispered, "Bring them back." Maybe the lake didn't take the counselors. Maybe it wanted the kids. But they escaped. And now, 20 years later, the lake was calling its debt. Suddenly, the front window shattered. Cold air rushed in like a scream. And there, Standing in the doorway, was the figure. Tall. Thin. Faceless beneath the dripping black hat. Skin pale as bone, clothes soaked from head to toe. It raised a finger and pointed at Luke. The room erupted in chaos. The kids outside began chanting something low and rhythmic, voices blending into the night like a hymn. "Stay with us. Stay with us. Stay with us." Chris grabbed a rusted crowbar from the corner. "We're getting out. Now." He smashed through the back door, leading them into the woods behind cabin 12. But the forest wasn't right. The trees twisted in impossible shapes, branches tangled like reaching hands. Paths looped back on themselves. No matter where they ran, the lake always reappeared in front of them. Finally, exhausted and terrified, they stumbled into the old amphitheater, where they used to put on talent shows as kids. And there, sitting on the stage like the ghost of summers past, was the same photo Luke found. But now it showed 4 kids on the dock. One of them was missing. And next to the empty space, the tall figure smiled. The air thickened. Sarah dropped to her knees, tears streaming. "This place. It never let go of us. We just forgot." The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. "Someone has to stay." The woods lit with the faint glow of lanterns. Hundreds of them. Flickering in the darkness like the souls of the drowned. Luke stepped forward, chest heaving, voice steady. "I'll do it." But before anyone could stop him, the ground beneath him cracked open. A wave of cold lake water burst upward, dragging him into the earth. Gone. The voices fell silent. The fog lifted. And for the first time all night, the woods were empty. The others stood there, breathless, frozen. Luke was gone. But the lake was still. For now. What the water remembers. The woods fell silent after Luke disappeared. No whispers. No footsteps. Not even the wind. The only sound was the soft ripple of Dead Man's Lake behind them. Chris, Emily, Sarah, and Ben stood frozen in the clearing, unable to move, unable to speak. Luke was gone. Just like that summer in '99, the lake had taken what it wanted. But the strangest part? They weren't afraid anymore. Not in the way they'd expected. There was a strange calm in the air. Like the storm had passed. But something still felt unfinished. Ben was the first to speak. "We have to go back to the dock." Emily shook her head, voice cracking. "You're insane. We barely made it out alive." But Ben stared at the woods, his eyes distant. I think Luke's still out there. Somewhere. He gave himself up for us, but this place doesn't let go that easily." The others exchanged nervous glances. And even though every instinct told them to run, they turned back toward the lake. Because sometimes the only way out is through. They found the dock just as the fog began to thin, gray morning light seeping across the glassy surface of the lake. The canoe was gone. But something floated in the water where Luke vanished. A single lantern. Still lit. Its flame barely flickering against the breeze. Sarah knelt by the edge of the dock, staring at her reflection. But it wasn't her reflection staring back. It was a child's face. Her face. From 1999. Smiling. Suddenly, the water rippled. And Luke's voice echoed across the lake. "Go home." It was faint, distant, like a radio broadcast caught between stations. Tell them to remember us." Then silence. The lantern blinked out, leaving only the still, dark water behind. Chris dropped to his knees, tears falling. Was that really him? Ben shook his head. Or what's left of him? They stayed there until the sun broke over the treetops, casting long shadows over the cabins, the dock, and the lake that had taken so much from them. Back at the gates of Camp Hollow Pines, they hesitated. It felt wrong to just leave. But what else could they do? The past had claimed its due. And they were still breathing. For now. They didn't speak much on the drive home. How could they explain what happened? How do you tell people that a summer camp swallowed your best friend 20 years late? That ghosts wear your childhood face? That somewhere out there, the woods and the water are still waiting for you to come back? Weeks passed. Then months. They drifted apart again. Chris moved to Seattle. Emily buried herself in work. Sarah went back to therapy. Ben stopped sleeping altogether. But every now and then, when the wind picked up just right, they heard it. A faint laugh carried on the breeze. Like kids playing tag on a summer night. And sometimes, when their radios scanned the frequencies at 3 a.m., they caught a broadcast. Just static at first. But if you listened closely, a voice whispered through the noise. "Capture the flag at sundown. Don't be late." Luke's voice. Still calling them home. One night, almost a year later, Chris got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a faded photo. 5 kids standing on the dock at Deadman's Lake. And in the background, far across the water, the tall, thin figure still watching. Still waiting. So what's the truth? Did the lake take them? Did the guilt finally catch up? Or is Camp Hollow Pines just one of those places where the past never dies? Maybe next summer, some curious kids will wander in. Maybe they'll hear voices calling from the lake. And maybe they'll never come back out. Deadman's Lake is still there. The fires still burn some nights. And if you're quiet, if you listen, you'll hear them calling your name. The lighthouse that never stopped shining. The light beyond the fog. You ever think about the places we build to keep us safe? But somehow, they end up being the places that trap us? That's how I feel about the Marrow Point Lighthouse. Perched on a jagged cliff off the coast of Maine, battered by salt spray and winter storms, it was supposed to be a guardian. A beacon. A light to warn sailors of the rocks. But Marrow Point never stopped shining. Not once. Even when the storms passed. Even when the ships stopped coming. Even when the lighthouse keeper was gone. The town of Marrow's End is the kind of place that doesn't show up on your GPS. If you find yourself there, it's because something, or someone, wanted you to find it. 56 people live there now. Used to be hundreds. But people drifted away, like tides pulling the living farther from the light. But that lighthouse? That light still sweeps the sea every 7 seconds. And no one knows who's turning it on. This story starts with Claire Hensley. She was a photojournalist from Boston. Independent, stubborn, chasing stories no one else would touch. Claire had a habit of finding the truth in places people wanted to forget. And when an old fisherman named Reed told her about the light at Marrow Point that never shut off, even when the lighthouse was abandoned in 1974, she packed her gear and drove 6 hours north. She wanted a ghost story. Instead, she found something worse. Claire arrived in Marrow's End on a cold October evening. The town barely acknowledged her. Locals at the diner turned away when she asked about the lighthouse. The gas station attendant, a pale man named Glenn, just said, "Best not to ask about things that still work when they shouldn't." But curiosity has a way of making you deaf to warnings. That night, with only a full moon and the distant crash of waves for company, Claire walked the rocky path up to Marrow Point. The lighthouse loomed out of the fog like a ghost rising from the earth. White paint peeling, windows cracked, the iron railing rusted through. But the light burned like a star. A single, unwavering beam cutting through the dark like a sword. She stood there for a long time, the wind whipping her hair, listening for signs of life. Nothing but the waves below. But when she turned to leave, something strange happened. The light stopped mid-rotation and pointed directly at her. It should have been impossible. But the beam held steady. Frozen. Like it was watching her. She stepped back. And in that moment, the old foghorn blew once, deep and low, like a warning from the deep. Claire shuddered but pushed forward. She found the door to the keeper's quarters unlocked. Inside, dust, cobwebs, rotting floorboards. But also something else. A lantern burning on the desk. Fresh coffee in a chipped mug. And a journal, left open. The last entry was dated 3 days ago. It read, "Still shining. Still waiting. I hear them in the fog at night. I'm not alone up here anymore. If anyone reads this, don't turn off the light. Ever." And at the bottom, Walter Price, keeper of Marrow Point. The problem was, Walter Price died in 1974. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She snapped a photo of the journal. But when she looked at her camera screen, the photo wasn't what she expected. Instead of the journal, the screen showed a blurred figure sitting at the desk. A man. Thin, tired, head bowed like he'd been writing for years. But there was no one there. The temperature dropped fast. The windows rattled against the rising wind. And from somewhere upstairs, in the lantern room, footsteps. Slow. Steady. Heavy. She grabbed her flashlight and made her way up the spiral staircase, hard hammering. Each step groaned like a voice trying to speak. And when she reached the top, she found the lens chamber empty. But the light was still on. Turning. Spinning. Without anyone there to control it. And then she saw it. Outside the cracked glass, far out at sea. A ship. Black. Motionless. No sails. No engine. No lights of its own. Just floating on the waves. like it had been waiting for the light to find it. That's where part 1 ends. Claire came looking for a ghost story. But she found herself trapped in one. And whatever was out there on the water, it saw her now. The keeper and the dark horizon. The black ship didn't move. Not with the tide, not with the wind. It just floated on the waves, perfectly still, staring back at the lighthouse like a dead eye. Claire wiped the fog from the cracked glass, breath shallow in her chest. The beam swept over the ship every 7 seconds, illuminating its twisted masts and warped hull. And with each pass of the light, something else appeared. Figures. Lining the deck. Pale, motionless, featureless in the distance. They weren't crew. They were waiting. Suddenly, the lighthouse lights stopped spinning again, freezing mid-rotation, locking on the ship. And as it did, Claire heard it. "Hello," humming chant. Carried by the wind from the sea. Dozens of voices, old and cold, calling in a language she couldn't understand. Her heart raced. This wasn't just a ghost ship. It was answering the light. She stumbled down the spiral staircase, shoes echoing in the narrow shaft. The journal on the desk was open to a new page. One she didn't write. In fresh ink. "Turn it off, and the sea will claim the town. Leave it on, and it will claim you." She slammed the journal shut, breathing fast. "Who's doing this?" she shouted into the empty room. And from the shadows by the stairwell, a voice answered. "Quiet. Broken. The keeper watches. The keeper keeps the bargain." She spun the flashlight toward the voice. Nothing. Just peeling wallpaper and the wind scratching against the walls. But something in the room had shifted. It smelled like salt and decay. Claire gathered her gear and ran back to town. She needed answers. The locals weren't happy to see her. At the diner, they refused to speak at first. Until finally, old Reed, the fisherman who first told her about the light, sat beside her with a heavy sigh. "You saw the ship, didn't you?" She nodded slowly. Reed lit a cigarette, staring at his reflection in the coffee pot. "Every generation, someone's gotta stay up there. Keep the light turning. Keep the ship from coming ashore." Claire frowned. "But why?" He exhaled smoke like it hurt to breathe. "Because what's on that ship ain't from this world. Never was. Back in 1879, the first keeper found the wreckage of a whaling ship out past the reef. No survivors, just bones. But the bones were smiling. The keeper tried to warn the town. They didn't listen. So the thing on that ship made a deal. Keep the light spinning. And it stays out there, lost in the dark. Turn it off. And it comes for us." Claire felt a chill settle in her bones. "How long does the keeper have to stay?" Reed met her eyes. "Until someone else takes their place." The next day, Claire searched the town archives. Every lighthouse keeper listed since 1879 vanished. Walter Price, 1974. Jacob Collins, 1951. Sarah Whitmore, 1936. All gone. No graves. No records. Just missing. And the light never stopped spinning. That night, Claire returned to Marrow Point. She wasn't leaving without answers. The lighthouse was colder now, the fog thicker. And waiting for her at the top of the stairs was Walter Price. Clear as day. Wearing his old oilskin coat, soaked with seawater, his face pale and cracked like driftwood. But his eyes were still human. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped. Claire's voice trembled. "Why are you still here?" Walter looked out the window toward the black ship, still waiting beyond the rocks. "Because someone has to be." He explained it then. The lighthouse wasn't just a warning. It was a prison. And the keeper was the warden. Every night the light spun, it kept the ship adrift in eternal limbo. But the keeper could never leave. If they did, the bargain broke. And Marrow's End would drown in a sea of shadows. Claire looked at the lens. The light was flickering now. Weak. Dying. Walter met her gaze. "My time's up." He stepped back into the shadows, his form breaking apart like mist in the morning sun. "You know what happens next, don't you?" Claire stood alone in the cold chamber, staring at the ancient machinery. She had two choices. Turn off the light, walk away, and risk unleashing whatever waited on that ship. Or take the keeper's place. Stay. Alone. Forever. And then the foghorn blew again. Louder this time. The ship inched closer to shore. And the lighthouse light began to fade. The lightkeeper's curse. The beam flickered and died. For the first time in over a century, Marrow Point Lighthouse went dark. And the sea fell silent. Claire's breath froze in her throat as the fog outside thickened like smoke. Down below, the black ship stirred. Its hull groaned against the waves, turning toward shore. And for the first time, it moved. Slow. Deliberate. Inevitable. She scrambled to the control panel. Rusty gears. Frayed wires. No power. No time. And in the glass, something horrific. The figures on the ship's deck were no longer still. They moved in unison, like broken marionettes. Reaching out. Waiting for the darkness to take hold of the coast. Claire heard the voices now, louder than ever before. Not in her ears, but in her mind. The light is gone. The gate is open. A chill ran down her spine. She realized something then. This wasn't a prison. It was a seal. And the ship wasn't lost, it was waiting to come home. The keeper's journal sat open on the desk, pages flapping in the cold wind. One final note scrawled at the bottom. Light the flame with your own will. Or the sea will light it with your soul. Claire looked up at the ancient lantern. The manual crank. The emergency wick. Old technology. Primitive. But it could work. If she fueled it herself. She struck a match. Her hands trembled. The wick caught, weak at first, then burning brighter. The beam returned, fractured but alive. And as it swept across the water, the ship froze mid-drift. Its figures shrieked in agony, covering their faces from the light. But they didn't vanish. They retreated. Slowly. Reluctantly. Sliding back into the fog, where things wait to be forgotten. The sea calmed. The waves grew still. And for a moment, there was peace. But the cost was clear. The light needed a keeper. Someone living. Someone who wouldn't leave. Claire sat at the desk where Walter Price once wrote his last words. She looked at the town far below, sleeping under the lighthouse's warm glow. They would never know. They wouldn't remember her name. They'd just see the light, spinning every 7 seconds. Keeping the darkness at bay. For a while, she tried to send a message out. Radio broadcasts. Satellite pings. But they faded into static, swallowed by the fog. And soon, time itself began to slip. She couldn't remember how long she'd been there. Days? Weeks? Years? It didn't matter. Because the sea still whispered. And the ship still waited. And the light never stopped spinning. Some nights, through the cracked window, she thought she saw someone walking up the rocky path. Another curious traveler. Another soul drawn to the light. She wanted to warn them. But when she opened her mouth, no words came out. Only the hollow, distant cry of the foghorn. Far below, in Marrow's End, the townsfolk still tell the story. Of a woman who came looking for ghosts. And became one. They say if you stand on the cliffs at midnight, you'll see her silhouette in the lantern room. Still watching. Still waiting. Still shining. And the ship? It's still out there. Beyond the fog. Waiting for the light to go out. Waiting for the keeper to fall asleep. Waiting. For you. The whispers beneath Willow Creek High. Something still breathing in the basement. High schools are supposed to be where you find yourself. Friends. Love. Drama. You stay up late studying for finals and fall asleep dreaming about your future. But not Willow Creek High. At Willow Creek, something was waiting in the dark. Something that listened when you cried in the bathroom. Something that watched you walk down those cracked hallways, waiting for the right night to reach out and whisper your name. They say every town has that one school where weird things happen. Where kids disappear, rumors spread like wildfire, and the janitor always locks the basement tight. Willow Creek was that school for the town of Maple Pines, Oregon. Built in 1952, right on top of what used to be the town's original cemetery. And they didn't bother to move the graves. Just paved right over them. The story begins with Ryan Carter. Senior. Varsity swim team. Smart enough to coast by, charming enough to get away with it. But Ryan wasn't sleeping much lately. Because every night for the past 2 weeks, he'd been hearing it. A voice. Soft. Broken. Close to his ear. Calling him from the school basement. Help me. At first, he blamed it on stress. College apps. Family drama. Usual teenage stuff. But when his little sister found a note slipped under their front door one morning, everything changed. A crumpled piece of notebook paper, torn from a Willow Creek High spiral. It said, "You left me down here, Ryan. Come back." No signature. But Ryan knew the handwriting. It belonged to Ethan. His best friend. The same Ethan who'd gone missing last fall. They searched for Ethan for weeks. Posters. Candlelight vigils. Police said he probably ran away. But Ryan knew better. because Ethan disappeared after they broke into the basement one night on a dare. And Ryan was the last one to see him. Back then, it was just supposed to be a dumb prank. They climbed through the boiler room vent after midnight, found the old storage tunnels under the school. Cold, wet, silent. And somewhere down there, they heard something move. Ryan panicked and ran. He told himself Ethan was right behind him. But when he turned around at the exit, Ethan wasn't there. Now, almost a year later, the basement was calling again. And Ryan couldn't ignore it. He pulled together a group of people who had their own reasons for helping. Jess, his ex, tough as nails and still mad at him for breaking her heart. Marcus, the conspiracy theory kid who thought the whole town was cursed. Lily, the quiet freshman who always seemed to know things she shouldn't. They met behind the school at 1 a.m., armed with flashlights and way too much nervous energy. Ryan led them through the rusted side door, down into the boiler room. The air smelled like mold and burned paper. And below them, in the dark, the whispers began. Turn back. Too late. It knows you're here. The basement was colder than it should have been. Rows of old desks and chairs stacked like broken bones. Flickering light bulbs overhead, buzzing like trapped insects. And deeper still, behind a locked steel door. The old fallout shelter from the 1960s. No one had been down there in decades. Officially, anyway. Jess found a rusty crowbar and forced the door open. What they found inside wasn't empty. Taped to the walls were old school photos. Hundreds of them. Black and white class portraits, dating back to the 50s. But every student's face was scratched out. Except one. The same boy in every photo. Smiling. Standing in the background. And in the final photo, dated 1974. That boy was standing next to Ethan. Ryan's blood ran cold. What the hell is this? He whispered. Marcus leaned in, adjusting his cracked glasses. I've seen him before. In the library archives. His name was Timothy Hale. A student who disappeared in 1974. They said he died in the basement. But his body was never found. Suddenly, the lights blew out. Pitch black. And in that silence, a voice echoed from the dark. Not Ethan's. Deeper. Older. You're too late, Ryan. He's mine now. A cold hand brushed the back of Ryan's neck. He spun around. But nothing was there. Only a faint glow coming from the far tunnel. They followed it, step by hesitant step, until the walls opened up into a cavernous space Ryan didn't remember. A room lined with broken lockers and desks arranged like an altar. And in the center, a chair. With someone sitting in it. Head down. Motionless. Ethan. That's where part 1 ends. But in Willow Creek High, finding someone is just the start. Bringing them back. That's where the horror begins. The boy who never left. Ethan sat in the chair, head bowed, his body barely breathing. The faint glow of the emergency light flickered over his pale skin. Ethan? Ryan called, voice breaking. No response. He stepped closer, heart pounding, every step echoing in that awful, hollow room. Ethan's lips moved, barely a whisper. It's still here. Jess swept the flashlight across the walls. Symbols. Carved into the brick with what looked like fingernails. Circles. Eyes. Repeated over and over again. And in the middle of the back wall, a message scratched deep and ragged. You break the circle, it breaks you. Marcus shuddered. Timothy Hale. I think he made some kind of deal. Ryan turned sharply. What kind of deal? The kind you don't walk away from, Marcus whispered. Then Lily spoke, quiet but certain. It's not Timothy anymore. They all looked at her. She stared into the shadows at the edge of the room. He's something else now. Something older. Something trapped in here so long. It forgot how to die. And then they heard it. Soft laughter. Like a child playing hide and seek. But the laugh echoed from everywhere at once. The light flickered again. And in the corner of the room, something stepped out of the shadows. A boy, maybe 15. Smiling. Wearing an old 1970s varsity jacket, his skin pale as paper, his eyes hollow like an abandoned house. Welcome back, Ryan. The boy's voice was too calm, too knowing. It's been a long time since someone finished the game. Ryan clenched his fists. What do you want? The boy tilted his head, smile widening. To be remembered. And in that moment, Ryan understood. Timothy Hale wasn't just some lost student. He was the memory of every forgotten kid in that school. Every name that faded from the yearbook. Every face no one looked for after they were gone. And now, he was feeding on the living to stay real. The boy's smile faded. "You left Ethan. But now you brought him back to me. That's fair, isn't it?" Jess stepped forward, holding the flashlight like a weapon. "We're not leaving him here." The boy's eyes darkened. "You don't leave. You stay. All of you." Suddenly, the ground shook. The floor beneath them cracked open, revealing black water below, like a flooded grave. And rising from the depths, faces. Hundreds of them. Students from every decade of Willow Creek's history. Their eyes gone, mouths open in silent screams. They reached for Ryan, Jess, Marcus, and Lily with icy hands. Ryan grabbed Ethan's limp body and pulled him from the chair. But the boy stepped in front of the only exit. "You can't save him. No one saves anyone down here." And then Lily did something none of them expected. She stepped forward and whispered something into Timothy's ear. The boy froze. For the first time, his smile faded completely. "What did you say?" he hissed. But Lily just stared back, calm and sad. "Your mother's still waiting for you. She never stopped looking." The boy staggered back, as if those words cut deeper than anything else. The shadows trembled. The faces beneath the water wailed in sorrow instead of rage. And for a moment, just a moment, the boy looked human again. Lonely. Lost. Ryan saw his chance. He sprinted past, carrying Ethan, the others right behind him. The walls groaned and cracked as they ran, the whispers screaming now, louder, angrier, desperate to pull them back. "Don't leave me alone again." But they didn't stop. Not this time. They burst through the fallout shelter door, back into the boiler room. The lights above sparked and flickered, but stayed on. And the whispers. They faded. Not gone. Just waiting. Outside, dawn broke over Maple Pines. The school looked the same. Cracked bricks. Faded banners. But something underneath had changed. For the first time in years, the basement was quiet. Ethan woke up later that day in the hospital. Pale. Weak. But alive. When Ryan asked him what he remembered, Ethan just shook his head. Darkness. And a voice that kept saying, "Finish the game." But here's where the story twists again. That night, when Ryan went back to his car, he found something taped to his windshield. A photo. Old. Black and white. A Willow Creek class picture from 1975. And there, in the second row, right next to Timothy Hale, was Lily. Smiling. Just like she did tonight. The ones who stay behind. Ryan stared at the photo, his hands shaking. It wasn't possible. Lily, quiet, awkward Lily, smiling in a 1975 class photo like she'd always belonged there. But the weirdest part? She hadn't changed. Same soft smile. Same bright eyes. Same silver locket around her neck. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible in the faded background, the boy. Timothy Hale. Smiling, too. The next day, Ryan found Lily at her locker, as if nothing happened. "Who are you?" he whispered. Lily shut her locker gently, tilting her head, sadness in her voice. "I used to be someone. A long time ago. Before they forgot me." She looked down the hallway where the shadows seemed just a little darker. "I tried to leave. I really did. But no one escapes Willow Creek. We're all just echoes, waiting for someone to listen." Ryan felt the weight of her words settle like dust in his chest. "So what happens now?" She smiled softly, like someone who'd already lived the answer. "Now, the school sleeps. Until someone else wakes it up." But Ryan couldn't leave it at that. He went back to the basement. Alone. The fallout shelter door still hung open. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. No whispers. No shadows. Just the chair. Empty. And on the wall, written in fresh chalk, "Thank you." For a moment, he thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught something new. A second door. Hidden behind old filing cabinets. Smaller. Older. He pulled it open. Inside was a narrow stairwell, leading deeper. Deeper than any blueprint of the school showed. Ryan hesitated. But something pulled him down. Not fear. Curiosity. And maybe, a little guilt. The air thickened as he descended, the walls narrowing until he had to crouch. And then he found it. A room. Stone walls. An old desk. And carved into the rock above it, in jagged letters, "The First Keeper." On the desk, a single letter. He flipped it open. Inside were names. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Every student who had ever gone missing from Willow Creek. Dates. Descriptions. And next to each name, the word taken. Until the final entry. Ryan Carter, taken 2024. Ryan's heart froze. He was still alive. Wasn't he? Suddenly, behind him, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Timothy. But he looked older now. Tired. Worn. More shadow than boy. Somebody always has to keep the ledger, Timothy said quietly. And now? It's your turn. Ryan shook his head, backing away. No. I'm leaving. I'm done with this. But Timothy just smiled, the same sad smile Lily wore. Leaving? No one leaves. They just forget they ever stayed. The walls closed in. The room faded. And Ryan felt it. Memories slipping away like sand through his fingers. His friends. His family. His life before Willow Creek. And in their place. The school. The whispers. The darkness beneath the floor. And then silence. Weeks later, the school reopened after repairs. Nothing unusual, they said. Just a flooded basement, some old wiring issues. Ethan transferred to another school, far away. Jess graduated and left town. Marcus posted a blog about haunted schools, but no one really believed him. And Lily? Lily was still there. Freshman year, sitting in the back of homeroom. Quiet. Watching. Waiting. One day, a new kid named Jamie transferred in. Curious. Restless. Jamie asked about the basement. About the old stories. And Lily just smiled, tilting her head. "Want to see for yourself?" And in the boiler room, late at night. If you listen closely, you'll hear someone writing in the ledger. Scratching your name onto the list. And in the darkness, a voice will whisper. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Because some places never let you go. They just wait for you to come back. The Vanishing Motel on Route 46. Vacancy for the lost. There's a stretch of Route 46 in Nevada that isn't on most maps anymore. Long, cracked pavement that runs straight into nowhere, where the radio fades into static and your cell signal dies somewhere between reality and the next life. Most drivers pass through without seeing a thing. But sometimes, late at night, when you're running from something you can't escape, or chasing something that never really existed, you see it. Flickering neon, glowing weakly through the dust and dark. Desert Moon Motel. Vacancy always lit. No matter what time you arrive. This story begins with Alex Monroe. Mid-30s, former musician, burned out by life on the road. He'd been driving cross-country, running from a heartbreak that felt like it would never end. His last gig was in Denver. Since then, it had been all empty highways, midnight gas stations, and old playlists that made his chest ache. But somewhere past midnight, his GPS froze. The same stretch of blacktop looping over and over again. And that's when he saw it. A faded sign swaying in the desert wind. Desert Moon Motel. Exit now. Something told him to keep driving. But something else, something colder, told him to stop. The motel sat like a fossil beneath the moonlight. 12 rooms, cracked swimming pool, rusted soda machine humming softly. The air smelled like dry earth and lost time. No cars in the lot. Except for one. A cherry red '67 Mustang parked under a flickering lamp. Engine cold. No one in sight. Alex stepped inside the office, bell jingling above the door. Behind the counter stood a woman, maybe late 20s, wearing a faded uniform and a polite, distant smile. "Welcome to the Desert Moon. How long you staying?" Alex hesitated. "Just for the night." She slid a rusty key across the counter. "Room 9. Checkouts whenever. Nobody's in a hurry around here." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And neither did the warmth in her voice. The room was exactly what he expected. Peeling wallpaper. Buzzing ceiling fan. A bedspread older than his parents' wedding. But when he flipped on the TV, there was only one channel. Black and white static. Except. Sometimes, between the fuzz, he saw images. A gas station. A car crash. A man standing alone in the desert, waving at no one. And every time the static cleared for a moment, the same word flashed on the screen. Stay. Sleep didn't come easy. The wind outside sounded almost like voices. And at 3:17 a.m., someone knocked on his door. Soft at first. Then harder. Alex sat frozen on the bed. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. Until a voice whispered through the thin wood. "You shouldn't have stopped." He opened the door, but the hallway was empty. Except for something lying on the ground. An old photograph. Faded. It showed a family standing in front of the Desert Moon Motel. A man, a woman, and a little boy holding a toy airplane. The man was smiling. Alex stared at the photo, heart sinking. Because the man in the photo was him. But he'd never been here before. Had he? The next morning, the desert sun rose over Route 46. Alex packed his bags and checked out. Or tried to. The office was empty. No clerk. No keys. The guest book on the counter was open to the last entry. It read, Alex Monroe, checked in, July 4, 1983. But it was 2025. Suddenly, the phone on the counter rang. He picked it up. A voice crackled through the static. Room 9 is yours now. Forever. Click. Alex ran to his car, heart hammering. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as he tore out of the lot. But when he hit the highway, the signs made his blood run cold. Exit now, Desert Moon Motel. Over and over again. Every turn he took, every mile he drove, led him back to the same cracked driveway. Back to the motel. And when night fell, the neon sign flickered on again. Vacancy. Still waiting. Still shining. You can't leave what you carry inside. Alex Monroe had never believed in cursed places. He thought ghosts were just metaphors. Places like the Desert Moon Motel didn't exist outside horror movies and campfire stories. But now? Now, every road led back to the same cracked parking lot under the same flickering neon sign. No matter how far he drove. How fast. What direction. Night after night, there it was again. Desert Moon Motel, vacancy. On the third night, exhausted and delirious, he checked back in. The woman at the front desk was still there. Same faded uniform. Same hollow smile. Except this time, she said something new as she handed him the key. You came back quicker than most. Room 9 hadn't changed. Same peeling wallpaper. Same one-channel TV. But when he turned on the static tonight, it was different. He saw himself. Driving through the desert. Then sleeping alone in that room. Then standing at the edge of a cliff. Looking down at something he couldn't see. And over it all, the word flashed again. Stay. That night, the knocking returned. But this time, Alex didn't open the door. He spoke to it instead. What do you want from me? A long pause. Then a voice, faint but clear. You brought yourself here. Sleep finally came. And with it, a dream. The dream took him back to Denver. Back to the night it all fell apart. The night he lost Emily. They'd been together 5 years. She loved his music. Loved his reckless dreams. Until the night she didn't come home. A car accident. Late. Icy roads. She'd been coming to see his final show. But he never made it on stage. He was too busy drowning himself in a bottle in the green room, wondering if he should quit. She died on the way to support him. And he never forgave himself. When Alex woke up, the Desert Moon Motel was gone. He was lying on the side of the highway. Alone. The sun rising over the empty desert. No neon lights. No parking lot. Just a single road sign swaying in the breeze. Route 46, last stop before the end. But his car was still there. Keys in the ignition. Like he'd never left. For a brief moment, he thought maybe he'd escaped. Maybe it was all a dream. But when he turned on the radio, it was playing his song. The one he wrote for Emily. The one no one else had ever heard. And a voice came through the static. Soft. Familiar. Why did you leave me there? Tears blurred his vision. Emily? He whispered. But the voice was already gone. Desperate for answers, Alex drove back into town. But when he reached the nearest gas station and asked the old man behind the counter about the motel, the man just stared at him. Desert Moon. Son, that place burned down in '84. Nobody's seen it since. Alex froze. Then how? How did I stay there? The old man lit a cigarette, shaking his head. Some people say it shows up for folks who can't outrun their regrets. You don't find the desert moon. It finds you. That night, unable to sleep, Alex followed a hunch. He dug through newspaper archives in the local library. And there it was. A yellowed article from July 4, 1983. Freak fire destroys Desert Moon Motel. Guests presumed dead. At the bottom of the article was a list of names. One caught his eye. Emily Lawson, guest, room 9. The room she'd booked to surprise him after his last gig. She was coming to meet him. And she never made it home. The motel wasn't his prison. It was hers. And he'd been trapped in her unfinished goodbye. Room 9 will always be waiting. The wind howled across Route 46 as Alex Monroe turned his car around. He was going back. Back to the place no map could find. Back to where his regrets waited for him in a dimly lit motel room. He didn't care if it wasn't real. Didn't care if it killed him. He had to see her again. The sun dipped below the horizon. And there it was. Flickering in the dusk, just like before. Desert Moon Motel. Vacancy still lit. Still waiting. This time, when he stepped inside the office, the woman behind the desk looked sad. "You're back." Her voice was softer now, almost kind. "You know what this place really is, don't you?" Alex nodded. "A graveyard for what we can't forgive." She slid him the key to room 9 without another word. The hallway felt colder this time. Quieter. The peeling wallpaper whispered as he passed, like voices trapped in the walls. When he reached the door to room 9, he paused. Heart racing. Hands trembling. He turned the key. Inside, the room was empty. Except for a figure sitting on the bed. Emily. Just as he remembered her. Soft brown hair. Blue denim jacket. That quiet smile that always forgave more than he deserved. But her eyes were sad. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. Alex stepped forward, tears burning his throat. "I had to. I left you here." She shook her head. "No, Alex. I stayed here. You've been running ever since." The room dimmed as the TV crackled to life. Static. Then an image. The night of the fire. Emily standing outside the motel as flames rose behind her. Calling his name. Waiting for him to show up. But he never did. Because he was drunk, passed out backstage in Denver, missing the one chance he had to save her. Alex dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry. I never stopped hearing your voice. I never stopped seeing you in every town, every night I played. But I didn't come back for the music. I came back for you." She smiled softly, tears slipping down her cheek. "Then let me go." The lights flickered, the walls trembling. The motel groaned like something alive, trying to keep her trapped. But Alex stood. Took her hand. And for the first time in years, he felt warmth instead of regret. The room shook violently as the voice of the motel roared from the TV speakers. "She's mine." But Alex shouted back through the storm. "Not anymore." He pulled her toward the door. The shadows tried to stop them. Tried to drag them back into room 9. But they kept walking. One step at a time. And when they crossed the threshold, the motel vanished. Gone like smoke in the morning sun. Alex woke up lying on the side of Route 46. No Desert Moon Motel. No neon sign. Just endless desert, quiet and still. Emily was gone. But this time, her absence didn't hurt. Because he knew she wasn't trapped anymore. She was free. And maybe now. So was he. As he drove away, the radio crackled once more. Her voice, soft and distant. "Goodbye, Alex." He smiled through his tears. And for the first time in years, the road ahead felt open. But if you ever find yourself lost on Route 46, late at night, when the desert swallows your GPS and the stars flicker overhead, and you see a motel glowing faintly in the distance, with a single room still lit, don't stop. Because room 9 is waiting for someone else. And the Desert Moon Motel never stays empty for long.